On the day of my wedding, my elder sister wept bitterly as she threw herself into my fiancé's arms, demanding he abandon me. I raised my hand, intending to slap her across the face, but just then, I heard her inner voice. In my previous life, I had been blind and foolish, marrying a wretched man and meeting a tragic end, all to the benefit of that vile woman. But heaven took pity and granted me another life. This time, I would never choose wrong again. Who would have thought that before my slap could land, my fiancé shouted and stopped me? I turned down, then, without hesitation, delivered a resounding slap to each of them. So what if she had reincarnated? As it happened, so had I. Since we could not share the same bed in life, let them share the same grave instead. The first bow to heaven and earth. When I returned to life, it was precisely as I was bowing in marriage to Lord Arthur Jo. Beneath the red bridal veil draping my head, my body trembled. In that moment, a figure suddenly lunged forward, shoving me back a few steps. Then, by my ear, I heard my elder sister's sobs. Lord Jo, you cannot marry her. Am I not the one you have always loved? I was wrong before, but now I understand your true heart. Let me be your bride. Hearing those words, a chill sank into my chest. I lifted my veil. There she was, Lady Charlotte Tan, clutching my betrothed and weeping like pear blossoms in the rain. Everything before me, everything I had suffered in my past life, it was all exactly as in the dreams that haunted me. We were characters trapped in a tale. The difference was that she had been the proud, arrogant heiress, and I merely the humble foil to set her brilliance aflame. The entire story revolved down her struggle to reject an arranged marriage and pursue her so-called true love, a rakish young lord. In the end, through her schemes, she did marry that libertine, but the marriage was misery. Only upon her death did she realize the poor scholar she once despised had been her true match. Reborn, she believed she could seize happiness. What a pity, this story overlooked one flaw. I had been reborn as well. In my past life, unwilling to marry the impoverished Arthur Jo, she drugged me and sent me to his bed to cement the match. Though he never touched me, my reputation was destroyed. Father and my stepmother, eager to force my obedience, whipped me with rods soaked in chilly water until my flesh was in tatters. When I still refused, they brandished my late mother's bones, threatening to grind them to dust unless I wed. Yet even after marrying Arthur Jo, I knew no peace. When he finally rose to the rank of Prime Minister, he confessed, his heart had always belonged to Lady Charlotte. As for her, she did marry her beloved dandy. But within 2 years, he kept countless concubines and discarded her in disgrace. Later, when that lord fell into ruin, she too sank into poverty and hunger. We met again at a banquet. My stepmother sighed to her. If that wretched girl hadn't seduced the Prime Minister, you would have been Lady Jo long ago. That night, Charlotte pretended to offer me wine, then attacked me, driving a hairpin again and again into my throat. Blood sprayed her face, but still she was not sated. It's all your fault, you cursed creature. If you hadn't married Arthur Jo, I would have been the Prime Minister's wife. Clearly, she had been the one to shove me into the abyss, yet in the end, she still blamed me. In this moment, my fiancé's eyes were red, his lips trembling as he gazed at the woman in his arms. Their eyes met, like star-crossed lovers who had suffered 100 lifetimes. No matter the tale, remembering my past life filled me with icy rage. I raised my hand to strike her, but before I could, Arthur Jo stepped forward to shield her, roaring, "Miss Tan, such conduct is most improper. Most improper." I let out a cold laugh. Looking at the man who once shared my nights, I slapped him across the face. Arthur Jo froze, attempting to explain. I strode past him, lifted my hand, and struck Charlotte as well. Then, before all assembled, I raised my voice. "I find it perfectly proper. This is the wedding of myself and Lord Jo. Yet you, as the eldest daughter, dare storm into the hall and demand to marry my betrothed. To witness such shamelessness, this is my first time. Father, tell me, was I wrong to strike her?" Just then, I heard her heart speak again. "Wretched bitch, you would ruin everything for me again. In my past life, I was blind and married a monster, ending in ruin so you could prosper. But heaven has granted me another chance. This time, I will not fail." I stared at Charlotte's lips. She had not spoken aloud. Could it be I was hearing her very thoughts? At last, The guests recovered from their shock. My father gaped, then thundered. Charlotte Tan, what madness is this? Stand down at once. But she would not yield. Her voice was urgent. Father, the engagement between House Tan and House Zhou was always meant for me. How can you let her marry Lord Zhou? My father's gaze turned icy as it fell on me. And why is that, pray tell? Why else? Because she was shameless enough to orchestrate it. I clenched my fists. In this life, Charlotte would stop at nothing to marry Arthur Zhou, so I needed only to wait for her to sabotage the match herself. Indeed, she drew a deep breath and declared, Father, those rumors that my sister and Lord Zhou were intimate were lies spread by wicked servants. I swear on my life, she was with me that day. She is innocent. And so, the wedding ended in chaos, and I reclaimed my good name. Pity the maids in her service, all sold to the brothels on her single word. Later, my father summoned her to the study. I returned to my chambers. I knew, with Charlotte's interference, I would escape the fate of marrying Arthur Zhou. But the debts of the past, how could I not repay them? Just then, my door creaked open. Charlotte entered slowly. Seeing her, I suppressed my fury and asked coldly, What do you want? Her eyes glittered with loathing as she spoke in a mocking tone. Why? To visit my dear sister, of course. She approached, staring fixedly at the red bridal veil folded on my table. Then, like a madwoman, she snatched up a pair of shears and hacked the veil into scraps. I know you despise this marriage, so today, I did you a favor. Father has agreed. The betrothal is annulled. Oh, and if you ever cross paths with Lord Zhou again, you'd best keep your distance. If I find you trying to entice him, I will shred your face to ribbons. Tankaren, you would do well to remember your station. You are but a lowly concubine-born daughter, not even worth the slippers of my maids. Never dream of rising above me. Do you understand? I lowered my gaze and replied softly, I understand. Good. In my past life, it was by her schemes that I came to ruin. After orchestrating the farce of placing me in Arthur Zhou's bed, she had led a throng of maids to storm in and catch us in the act. Feigning heartbreak, she accused me and Arthur of debauchery, dragging me, still bewildered, off the bed and slapping me senseless. As for my father, though I insisted Charlotte Tan had framed me, he not only refused to punish her, but declared that having lost my purity, marriage to Arthur Zhou was my best outcome. What followed was torment and coercion. Even the day before my wedding, she would not relent. She had her servants pin me to the ground, crush the back of my hand under her heel, and laugh like a madwoman. So what if it was my doing? Father has always cherished me most. Arthur Zhou is a penniless scholar. Even if we were formally betrothed, I, the dignified heiress of House Tan, would never stoop to wed such a worthless man. No matter what, the one condemned to starve and wither beside him must be you. Who could have imagined she would attempt the same trick in this life? Once Charlotte had boasted her fill, she sauntered off in triumph. Before long, Arthur Zhou himself appeared outside my chamber. Second lady, he called, I have come to make a few matters clear. I swept a disinterested glance at the silhouette beyond the door, then gave a cold hum. Arthur continued, that you hold affection for me. This is a fortune unworthy of my humble self. But your conduct is truly contemptible. Even had Lady Charlotte not intervened today, and I been forced to wed you, I would have despised you all my life. I advise you to conduct yourself with dignity. Affection, indeed. So this was why, in my past life, he loathed me yet never quite destroyed me. How convenient. He despised me, and I held him in equal disdain. A few days of uneasy calm passed before Charlotte sent someone to summon me, claiming she wished to speak. I knew her scheme was about to unfold. The moment I stepped into the room, there she sat, her demeanor wholly transformed from the day before. She even instructed her maid to brew tea. Sister, she began, her voice sweet as syrup, soon I shall be wed to Lord Zhou. This cup of tea you must drink, so we may reconcile before my marriage. If you refuse, it would wound my feelings. Her tone grew cold as she suddenly stood and seized my chin, forcing me to meet her gaze. And if I am displeased, the consequences will be dire. I regarded her calmly, then accepted the teacup. So be it, just a cup of tea. I will drink it. Charlotte's eyes gleamed with smug triumph, the face of a petty villain gloating over her trap. But while she was not watching closely, I suddenly flung the tea in my hand straight into her mouth, then feigned alarm. Oh dear, my apologies, sister. My hand slipped. Are you all right? Quickly, I poured myself another cup. Your kind intention, I have received. Just now I made a mess, so allow me to drink this as a gesture of respect. Charlotte was still spluttering, but when she saw me lift the cup to my lips, she glanced sharply at the tea tray. And then I heard her thoughts. Wretched slut, just now I nearly drank the cup laced with the draft. This one she poured herself, there should be nothing wrong with it. She lunged to snatch the cup from me, and drained it in a single swallow. She even tossed me a scornful look. I have drunk it, this debt between us. I will settle another day. I smiled as she swept out, then lowered my gaze to the teacup still warm in my hand. She had still miscalculated, for that tea had been poured from her own poisoned pot. Indeed, she had gone only a few steps before I heard her maid cry out in alarm. My lady, what is happening to you? I stepped to the door, adopting an anxious expression. Sister, what is it? Charlotte's face had flushed deep crimson, her eyes growing dazed and glassy. She tried to focus on me, but no words emerged. I turned and snapped at the maid. Can you not see your mistress has taken ill? Are you waiting for my father to witness this disgrace and flay you alive? Go, fetch a physician at once. The maid already knew what Charlotte had plotted. Seeing her mistress in this state, she dared not think further. She turned and fled. When she was gone, I supported Charlotte's tottering figure and led her straight to the old woodshed she herself had prepared. As I shoved her inside, I heard the nauseating voice of the foppish young lord she'd consorted with. My lovely blossom, I have come at last. You've kept me waiting so long. In my past life, both Arthur Jo and I were victims of Charlotte's machinations. The difference was, she had ordered Arthur clubbed unconscious, while I was drugged with an aphrodisiac and flung onto his bed. The potion was so strong I nearly lost my mind. In desperation, I had drawn a hairpin and stabbed it deep into my thigh. The agony cut through the haze, and then, mercifully, I blacked out. When I awoke, I was lying beside Arthur Jo, my clothes in disarray. At that very moment, Charlotte stormed in to catch us in adultery. Even now, I can still recall the false pity on her face. She wept pitifully, tears like pearls upon her cheeks, and accused Arthur over and over, declaring that he, who was formally betrothed to her, had dared to conspire with me in this vile affair. From then on, I was condemned as the shameless woman who ruined Deather's match, a brazen harlot reviled by all, while she was pitted as the tragic maiden robbed of her love. Yet now, the one who would reap the bitter fruit of her schemes was Charlotte herself. I intended to watch how she would struggle to escape. Sure enough, everything unfolded precisely as she had plotted. Under the guidance of bribed maids and servants, my father was led, by chance, to the woodshed. The moment the door swung open, the entwined figures of man and woman were laid bare before all present. The maid Charlotte had planted did not even bother to look closely before she shrieked. Second lady, to think the first lady staked her very honor to vouch for your virtue. Who could have known you were truly capable of such filth? My father was so shocked he nearly burst into curses. But just then, I stepped calmly into view. Father, what is the matter here? The maid saw me standing there unscathed, and went white as a corpse. She turned to stare in terror at the woman clinging to the foppish Henry Ha, then dropped heavily onto her backside. How can you be here unharmed? My father nearly spat blood from rage, staggering back 2 steps before roaring. Men, take the first lady to her chambers, guard her closely. And as for this man, bind him. Roused from their stupor, Henry Ha at once dropped to his knees with a thud. Honored father-in-law, he cried, it was I who wronged your daughter. Lady Charlotte and I share a bond of love. Today's disgrace is my doing alone. I beg you to let me take her as my wife. I stood in silence, savoring the splendid farce, while my gaze drifted toward Arthur Jo. I wondered how far this blind fool, so smitten with Charlotte in every version of the tale, would go to debase himself. Sure enough, Charlotte caught sight of Arthur standing in the doorway. At that instant, she forgot her shame. She hastily tugged her garments into place, then swung her hand to slap Henry Ha across the face. Scoundrel! Whoever said I loved you? Then she collapsed to her knees before my father. Father, I was framed, no matter what. I would rather die than wed this wretch. My father looked at her, then at Henry Ha, before sighing heavily. Charlotte, you have lost your innocence to Lord Ha. If you will not marry him, and this scandal leaks out. The House of Tan has only 2 daughters. The first time, others could believe it was slander. But the second, his voice trailed off. The pained concern on his face, the tender grief, so different from how he treated me back then. Charlotte bent low, sobbing in desperation. Father, only those here have witnessed this. If all will hold their tongues, I can still preserve my reputation. My father still hesitated, torn. Seeing this, Charlotte raised her tear-stained face and spoke again. Father, I do not ask to marry a nobleman or a wealthy heir. I only wish to be joined with Lord Arthur. This. My father looked over to Arthur Joe. His expression had grown strangely unsettled. Charlotte turned toward him, voice trembling. Arthur, once, you confessed your heart to me. You called me the moon shining in your sky. You vowed that so long as we loved each other, you would never abandon me. Now, do you find me unworthy? Though I never dared show my heart, I had long since surrendered to your talents. Must we truly forsake each other for this? Arthur Joe, ever the blind, besotted fool, fell to his knees. Honored father-in-law, he declared solemnly, I care nothing for what has happened. I believe Lady Charlotte was wronged. I swear before all, this life and the next, I shall never betray her. At those words, Charlotte could no longer hide the glint of triumph in her eyes. But my father still fretted. But, if today's matter comes to light. He had not finished speaking before Charlotte drew a hairpin from her hair and pressed it to Henry Ha's throat. Henry Ha, I tell you this. If you dare breathe a single word of what happened today, even if I must die, I will drag you to the grave with me. Henry Ha was so terrified he hardly dared breathe, nodding frantically in agreement. Charlotte then shoved him aside and looked coldly at my father. Father, now you can be at ease. Having rid herself of Henry Ha, Charlotte at once turned to weep and wail before my father. Father, you have always known my character. Though I am not the cleverest daughter, I have always known my place. All that happened today with that man, it was all the doing of her, Karen Tan. She pointed straight at me, her voice shrill with accusation. It was Karen who put something in the tea. I drank it by mistake, and that is how I fell into this calamity. Father, I know she has always resented me, always hated that you loved me best. But never did I dream she would be so cruel. Father, you must uphold justice for your daughter. Just as in my past life, I had not even opened my mouth to defend myself before my father's hand struck my cheek in a ringing slap. Wicked girl, he roared. To think you could harbor such venom in your heart. She is your own sister. I clung to a last shred of hope and spoke quietly. Father, clearly, I was the one nearly harmed. If you still have any sense, you may ask the maids to testify, or if you do not trust them, go to the apothecary and demand to know who ordered the medicine. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, then slowly shifted back to Charlotte. Charlotte stepped forward and with a vicious kick sent me sprawling. Lowborn wretch. Anyone with eyes can see your endless jealousy. Even now, you sow discord between us. Father, a creature this malicious ought to have been sold off long ago. Seeing my father still hesitating, she reminded him in a cold voice. Have you forgotten what I told you? Arthur Joe is no ordinary man. If that jinx of a sister continues to meddle, she will destroy all the Tan family's prospects. A glint of calculation flashed in my father's eyes. At last, he turned to me, his voice flat. Karen, if you must blame someone, blame your ill fate. Men, lock the second lady in the woodshed. Without my order, no one is to go near. In my past life, I had been shut in that dark place and tortured again and again. But after my rebirth, I had secretly ordered a hidden tunnel dug. So once I was imprisoned once more, I calmly gathered the clothing and silver I had prepared and slipped away while no one watched. The sky was wide, the world vast. Leaving the house of Tan behind, I refused to believe there was no place for me. I took lodging in a small inn and waited for my chance. As for Charlotte Tan and Arthur Joe, without me, or Henry Ha, to interfere, their marriage began to proceed in earnest. The Tan family had no male heirs, only Charlotte and me. Long ago, my father had resolved to keep Charlotte in the household as a cherished daughter-in-law, while I, after marrying Arthur Joe, had been cast out to live in a tumble-down cottage on the city's eastern edge. In my past life, I refused to submit to such a fate. Even in that ruined hut, I pressed Arthur to study. Yet he was dull-witted. I, having read the classics since childhood, could only guide him in his questions. Through all those bitter years, Charlotte, then wed to Henry would often come to my door to mock me, sneering that I deserved nothing better than to live in squalor, eating scraps. But heaven favored the steadfast. In the end, Arthur Jo passed the imperial examinations as top scholar. And now, I heard that after their wedding, Arthur and Charlotte remained comfortably in the Tan household, indulging daily in their pleasures, no thought spared for books. I quietly sent someone to inquire. Lord Arthur is a scholar, my agent reported. But he must not forget, study is the root of all success. Charlotte, reclining in Arthur's arms, looked disdainful. What would you know? My husband is blessed by the stars themselves. A few tattered scrolls will never trouble him. Besides, he still reads every day. Hearing this, I only smiled. If they would not seize their advantage, then I would. At last, my chance came. I encountered the Princess Royal herself, traveling in disguise. I could never forget what she had once said to me in that former life. She told me, "Why must women be lesser than men? You have the talents of a strategist. If our world were just, a woman such as you would stand before the throne in council, while such men would never set foot in court. If only in this age, women could serve as officials." She knew all I had done for Arthur Jo, understood that had it not been for my plans and sacrifices, he would never have risen to become Grand Minister. But this age was not yet ready. To make women equal to men would require more than the words of those in power, or of you and me. It would take thousands upon thousands of women awakening, standing up, and realizing they were sovereign beings in their own right. That road was too long, too arduous. Yet my ambition did not end there. More bitter still was that, in my past life, before I could confess these thoughts to the princess, news came. She had been implicated in a great scandal, confined to her palace, forbidden ever to leave again. Within half a month, word spread, the Princess Royal had taken her own life. That was a sorrow I could never let go. A woman who spoke of triumphing over men, she did not deserve such an end. But in this life, everything had come in time. The princess and I swiftly became confidants. She was astonished by my intellect. I admired her courage. Both of us hungered to achieve something worthy. One afternoon over tea, she gazed through the window at the bustling street beyond and sighed. "Tell me, why must a woman be born to rely on men? If I could persuade a few senior ministers to stand with me before my father, to petition that women be permitted to enter government, might we not see a new age of peace and prosperity?" My hand paused on my teacup. In my past life, she had sought out those ministers, perhaps for this very reason. And before she could realize her vision, someone discovered her plans. She was ruined. I studied her face and finally voiced the thought in my heart. I fear it may not be so simple. In this kingdom, from the time a girl can walk, she is taught the doctrines of obedience and virtue. To overturn that cannot be done in a season. But there is one way that might succeed. At my words, the princess's eyes brightened. What way? To open private academies, I said softly. Invite girls to study. Books awaken the mind. The more a woman reads, the more she will understand herself. And when thousands of women have found clarity, when they know that beyond dependence on men, there are other paths, then, and only then, will the moment of true change come. The Princess Royal listened quietly, then lowered her gaze. She drained her teacup in a single motion. "Very well," she said. "We shall do as you propose." Opening academies for girls was no small undertaking. To attempt something so grand without funds was impossible. So the princess and I parted ways, she to organize the schools, and I to build a business and earn the money to sustain them. Moreover, I often used her name to sponsor charities and relief efforts, joining her in aiding the needy wherever disaster struck. 1 year later, the number of women we had recruited to study had grown from a mere handful of 10 to more than 2,000. As for my enterprise, thanks to the princess's discreet patronage, I had avoided countless obstacles. My little shop soon expanded into a prosperous trading company. In the 3rd month of the following year, the results of the imperial examination were announced. Arthur Jo's name was nowhere to be found. I happened to be drinking tea in a pavilion when I overheard the tale. It was said that, before the examination, Charlotte Tan, desperate for Arthur's success, had sold most of the Tan family's remaining property to bribe the examiners. But the civil examinations were conducted with utmost rigor. Not only did the bribe fail, but a band of brigands learned of it and seized the entire fortune in a single raid. My father, unable to bear the shock, collapsed and died of rage. I remembered how, in my last life, he had always favored Charlotte, and now, in this life, he had died because of her. My heart could not quite untangle what I felt. When I stepped out of the tea house, I saw a man being shoved out the door. He staggered and fell heavily before the wheels of my carriage. The shopkeeper stood in the doorway, bellowing curses. No money, yet you still want to dine here. Get out. If not for the Tan family's name, I'd have thrashed you myself. I looked closer. The man was Arthur Joe. Soon, Charlotte herself appeared. She rushed forward, her face crimson, and helped him up without a word. I quietly ordered my driver to follow them and made my way to the Tan estate, so familiar to me once. Most of the servants had been dismissed or sold. Charlotte Tan was no longer the pampered lady of the house. She did everything herself, washing, cooking, cleaning. Arthur Joe sat in the courtyard, clutching a book but dozing in the sun. I watched in silence. This time you failed, I said gently, but there will be other chances. If you study diligently, even if you never rise to first scholar, surely you can still pass as a presented scholar. At my words, Charlotte, who had been scrubbing laundry, turned and flung the washboard aside. You came here to gloat, didn't you? She shouted. Listen to me, my husband was born destined to be first scholar. I don't need you to stand there speaking your poisonous nonsense. Do you think because I am brought low now, I will remain so? When Arthur takes the laurels and becomes Grand Minister, and you, who cling to the princess's favor, think you will always rise. Just wait. One day, I will crush you underfoot. I hadn't expected her resentment to run so deep, but I said nothing further. 3 days later, news came from the south. Devastating floods had destroyed countless homes, sending families fleeing in desperation. When the princess spoke to me about the calamity, she paused to ask, His Majesty has released silver for relief, but it will not be enough. Karen, will you join me in bringing aid? In that moment, my thoughts were not on her question, but on the past. In my last life, the same flood had struck. Countless and scrupulous merchants had seized the chance to hoard grain and drive up prices, lining their pockets while others starved. The chaos had frustrated the court's relief efforts, and many who might have been saved perished instead. Though the imperial treasury later launched investigations, the dead remained dead. I looked steadily at the princess. No, Your Highness, I said. The court will send officials to distribute aid. What matters more is that we must stockpile grain ourselves, before others can seize it all. When I laid out my reasoning, the princess committed all her resources to help me gather supplies. But our funds were finite. Though we secured much of the grain, other merchants colluded to corner the market, determined to profit from suffering. As in my past life, when the imperial court came to buy provisions, those hoarders demanded extortionate prices. Fortunately, we had amassed the greater share. The grain those profiteers had hoarded rotted unsold. The road had been difficult, but we eased the hunger of thousands. What I had not foreseen was that Charlotte Tan herself had joined the cabal of merchants. She had sold every last scrap of the Tan estate, gambling everything for a windfall. But we had undercut her plans. She could only stand watch as her stockpile decayed in the granaries, until finally she sank into true poverty. When she learned I had been behind it, she came herself to scream curses at my gates. Karen Tan, she shrieked, what have I ever done to you, that you must see me brought to this wretched end? I see it now. You are a blight, a curse. Your mother died giving birth to you. Your father died because of you, and now you've set your sights on me. I opened the doors. Her shrieking grew so foul that soon a crowd had gathered, gawking at the spectacle. Seeing the gathered crowd, Charlotte Tan did not restrain herself. On the contrary, she only grew more brazen, her voice sharp as she sneered. What's the matter? Nothing to say. Did I strike a nerve? Feeling guilty now, are you? I watched her quietly, then spoke in a flat, indifferent tone. I find you pitiable, empathetic. If I were you, I would never live such a wretched, broken life. You ought to reflect carefully, where, exactly, did everything go wrong? At that, Charlotte froze as though truly considering my words. But then I heard her thoughts, clear and venomous. Have the gall to ask me where it went wrong. Isn't all of this your fault, you cursed jinx? In the last life, because of you, I married that worthless Henry Ha. And now, you've meddled again. All because you have the princess to shield you. Wait, the princess. In the past life, she was accused of forming factions for her own gain. If I denounce her now, perhaps it will earn Arthur a government post. Hearing this, my heart clenched in disbelief. Even now, with everything in ruins, she was still dreaming of becoming a minister's wife. What a farce. Heaven had granted her a second chance, yet she refused to lift herself up. She pinned all hope on a man. Karen Tan, you may be triumphant for now, but you will never be triumphant forever. Just wait. Someday you will regret it. I knew she was resolved to go down this path. I merely looked at her coldly. Very well, I said softly. Then I shall wait. 3 days later, the Princess Royal arrived at my residence in her carriage. She joined me for tea and smiled. Sister Karen, she began lightly. Today, I did not come only to share tea. I have a rather interesting story to tell you. I set down my cup, curiosity piqued. What is it? The princess's gaze drifted out the window. It seems some common woman has somehow managed to deliver an accusation to His Majesty, claiming I have formed secret alliances and intend treason. My heart gave a jolt. I knew without doubt it was Charlotte. I had not expected her to act so swiftly. I leaned forward, voice urgent. What happened? Did His Majesty believe it? The princess shook her head calmly. He simply told me of it himself and asked my thoughts. I have always acted in the open and never consorted with any of the ministers that woman named. What evidence is there of any treachery? I nodded silently, saying nothing more. But she went on, her tone thoughtful. The woman claimed she was also surnamed Tan, and said she was your elder sister. As she spoke, her eyes settled on my face. I met her gaze steadily and confirmed it without hesitation. Yes, that is true. She is my elder half-sister, Charlotte Tan. Your Highness may recall, I once told you I fled my family rather than be sold by my father and sister. The princess inclined her head, letting out a soft sigh. I did not dwell on it. Only that she seems a malicious creature. You are fortunate to have escaped her. Who knows what torments you would have suffered, had you stayed. Then she reached across the table to rest her hand gently over mine. Karen, you are a woman of rare intellect and vision. A treasure. I will never allow such wretches to harm you. I have already made it clear to His Majesty that you and Charlotte have no ties. But as for her, she will not escape so easily. His Majesty has issued an order for her arrest. To slander a princess was a crime of high treason. I knew then that Charlotte's fate was sealed. I rose to my feet and gave the princess a deep bow. My thanks, Your Highness. As for Charlotte Tan, she had never imagined she would fall so low. When the edicts were posted across the city, naming her and Arthur Jo fugitives, she refused to submit to justice. That very night, she tried to flee with him. But no sooner had they slipped from the house than constables came thundering in pursuit. Arthur Jo ran faster, leaving her behind. She cried out after him, voice shrill with desperation. Arthur, Arthur, wait for me. But Arthur Jo had no intention of dying by her side. Hearing her voice only made him redouble his speed. Charlotte stumbled after him. When at last she caught up and gasped out, Arthur. He turned and shoved her hard to the ground, then kicked her savagely. All your fault. He spat. If you hadn't distracted me, I'd have passed the exams. And later, selling off everything to hoard grain, then dragging me into your mad scheme against the princess. Didn't you say you were some heaven-sent blessing? Didn't you swear everything was under your control? You're nothing but a cursed jinx. Get out of my sight. Even as the constables seized them both, Arthur Jo was still on his knees, groveling and wailing. Sirs, please, I had no part in her plots against the princess. It was all her doing. Take her, not me. But the officers did not care for his excuses. They dragged the two of them away together. All this I heard later, recounted by others. The saying goes, husband and wife are like birds in the woods. When calamity strikes, they fly apart. I had never seen it embodied more perfectly than in these two. The next time I laid eyes on Charlotte Tan, it was in the capital prison. The moment she saw me, she grew wild with rage. Karen Tan, she screamed, lunging toward me with bared teeth. You must be pleased with yourself now. Yes, I have lost. But don't gloat for too long. Even if I die, I will curse you. I frowned faintly, unable to fathom how she could still cling to such madness. Do you truly not understand? I asked quietly, that everything you have suffered, you brought upon yourself. Charlotte shook her head, eyes wide, voice trembling. No, it can't be. I knew every outcome. I should have lived a life of perfect triumph. Where did it all go wrong? First, the grain, Charlotte hissed, her eyes wild. If it hadn't been for you and the princess meddling, all my efforts would not have come to nothing. And then, the princess herself. Karen Tan, don't tell me that you too. I did not deny her. You guessed correctly. I too was reborn. Her breath caught. If you had the chance to choose again, why would you stake everything on a man so lacking in worth? Why not strengthen yourself, or build a business, find an honest path to restore the Tan family? Though I spoke with all the sincerity I could muster, she only stared back at me, lips twisting into a broken smile. Karen Tan, you hit it well. So very well. In the end, you and I were no different, only victor and vanquished. Had you been the one locked in this cell, and I standing outside, I too would have scorned you. So spare me your pious lectures. If I could live this life again, I would never hesitate. I would have strangled you the moment you drew your first breath. I had no words left for her. I turned and walked away. That autumn, Charlotte Tan was sentenced to execution. Arthur Zhou, declared her accomplice, was also condemned. While she waited for death in prison, I continued the work I had begun with the princess. In the 8th month of that same year, both Charlotte and Arthur were beheaded. The once mighty house of Tan passed into history. The following year, the emperor fell gravely ill. He issued an edict declaring that women, too, might sit for the imperial examinations. Encouraged by the princess, I laid aside my commerce and turned to scholarship. Never had I dreamed that one day, I would pass first among all scholars. On the day the results were posted, as the emperor, frail and dying, announced his abdication and named the princess as his heir, I stood stunned. Later, when she spoke of it, the princess said to me, "In truth, my father's decision was not so sudden. He had asked me more than once about the principles of good governance. I believe he had long weighed this choice. My brother is clever, yes, but he is vain, and his heart is small. He would have made a decent prince, but never a good sovereign. When we opened our academies, father sometimes came incognito to see the girls reciting the classics, debating statecraft. I think it was then he made up his mind. On the day of her coronation, she summoned me alone. Her bright, beautiful eyes shone with a joy that filled the chamber. Karen, she said, you have the gifts of a general, and I, of a ruler. Once, we built a business together. Now, shall we not rule this realm together as well? I smiled and bowed my head. Yes, I said. Let us. The day after her enthronement, as the ceremonies concluded, she had a decree readawed by the court eunuch. I was named Grand Chancellor. As I knelt to give thanks, I heard a single, clear chime in my mind. System notification. The hidden story of the cannon fodder supporting role has been fully awakened. Epilogue. The chronicles record that when Emperor Tsongshun abdicated in favor of the Princess Royal, a golden age dawned, an age when men and women alike could serve in the imperial court or command armies upon the field. In the 56th year of the Zhao Yuan era, the first woman chancellor passed away at the age of 89. She was laid to rest with full honors in the imperial mausoleum. The following year, the empress herself died at 92 and was interred beside her dearest friend. Willows wept, and pines whispered in the wind. Jade shattered, pearls scattered, yet the memory endured. So long as there were songs sung beneath the evergreens, so long as there were voices to praise their names, they would never be forgotten. The end.